Here we go. We're on. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Every Point's a Winner. I'm Axel Phillips, and I'll be taking you through the statistics of the NRL.com website, and we'll be talking about how you felt. I've been watching the replays all pretty much for half the day. I've been watching all the extended highlights. It's very hard to see every game unless you're doing it for a full-time job, but we do it here for the love of and the passion for rugby league. I'd like to say a few shout outs there. The Big Nova boys, big Canterbury fans. As you can see, we've got the blue and white in the background, celebrating Canterbury's massive win on the weekend. And a big shout out to Omar and also Adam. And a big shout out to someone not too far from here, one of the managers there at the Hotel Royale. And his name is Bishal Bharatki. Bharatki. Okay, I think I got it right. But anyway, he's a champion bloke. Love the guy to death. Does anything for you. Helps you out where you need it. Especially, he's a big fan of NRL, big fan of soccer. He's trying to get me to do soccer broadcast too, but I tell you what, I got my hands tied with this incredible rugby league competition we've got. Let's have a quick look at the games that went on over the weekend. It started last Thursday, and the Roosters came away beaten only by 4 points by the Melbourne Storm, 34-30. And it looked like at one stage the Roosters were going to cause a boil-over. We lost one of our main bankers for the anytime try scorers with Samuel Hughes. And really bad news going forward there for Samuel Hughes, apart from our couple of dollars we laid down on the game, was he may be out for the season, depending on how the scans go and what have you. Or they might be able to nurse him back. But I really wouldn't take a risk with a player of that calibre. But anyway, that's up to Craig Bellamy. I'm not the coach. And let's have a look at the try scorers. Daniel Tupou went over twice. Josh King surprisingly went over twice for Melbourne. Jack Howarth did entertain Jack Howarth. He was about 3-1 when he went over. Harry Grant, my goodness, we only had him last week. We let him go this week. Nick Meaney went over also. And the one that really killed him was the Stefano Utokomano. We had Trent Liero instead. Now, when Trent Liero was supposed to be scoring, Josh King was the one that was getting the balls. So what can you do? Zaka Doc Clay went over pretty late, but we did have a great collect of Lindsay Collins. We got him at $7.50. So hopefully you jumped on that one because he was our main standout banker along with Katoa, at least Katoa, but they had him marked for most of the night and he didn't get the ball. Once Hughes was injured, that was the end of that. He didn't get the balls he usually gets from Hughes. Sua Wong also went over, and the conversions were 5 from 5 from Sam Walker, and only 5 from 6 from Nick Meaney. Just looking at the top tacklers here, it was Connor Watson, phenomenal with 38. Harry Grant, exceptional with 40. He's always up there in the top tacklers, Harry Grant. What a workhorse animal he is. Most run metres, another great game for James Tedesco, 188. Jack Howarth, 186. Most line breaks, Daniel Tupou with 2. And Utokomano with 1, which led to the try. So let's go over to the one that we really like here is the team stats. Time and possession, 85% to Melbourne, surprisingly, and only 80% to the Roosters there. All runs metres were fairly similar by the looks of it here. Another 40 metres run, surprisingly, from the Roosters. Line breaks 3 to Melbourne and 2 to the Roosters. Tackle breaks, 44 tackle breaks for the Roosters, and they did lead for a portion of the game, and only 36 for Melbourne. So that's a little bit of a surprise stat there. Offloads 12 from Melbourne and only 7 from the Roosters. The receipts were fairly high from the Roosters, surprisingly. Total passes, an extra 40 passes for the Roosters. Dummy passes, 23 dummy passes from Melbourne and only 11 from the Roosters. Now, this is an important thing. Kicking. The kick defusal was only 50%, something Bellamy needs to look at, only 50% for Melbourne and only 44% for Trent Robinson's mob, the Roosters there. Now, let's have a look at defence. This is very important, but they're both fairly even. 86% to East and 85 to Melbourne. Missed tackles, however, 44 missed tackles for Melbourne and 36 for Roosters. You know, truly, if you're looking at these stats, there's nothing at this stage that's leaning more towards Melbourne, just that they came up with better plays. But here we go. Ineffective tackles, 17 from the Roosters and only 10 ineffective tackles from the Melbourne Storm. And as I said, they had more missed tackles as well. Unbelievable. Negative play, 10 to the Roosters and 11 negative plays with errors for the Storm. Nothing else jumps out at you there, but pound for pound, the more of the going forward for the Roosters. It was a game that I was inches away from tipping them, and I really thought they could have easily have caused the boil over there. But as it was, Melbourne held on. Going forward, without Samuel Hughes, yes, Munster's coming back, but going forward, there's question marks now how good they're going to be without Samuel Hughes because he's been such a stalwart in the success of Melbourne this year. They don't want to keep on losing ground either because there's a few sides that are chomping away at fourth position there now that the Warriors have lost, but we'll get to that game shortly. So surprisingly there, the stats did not lean towards a really good victory for Melbourne. It actually, you could have seen those stats and thought, well, Roosters got away with a victory. Now, the next match was a very strange match. It was virtually like a match in 4 quarters, like the original, remember, the old Amco Cup. They used to be played on Wednesdays with country sides in it and provisional sides in it. It was a fantastic thing as a kid, growing up to cheer your Sydney sides on against the country sides in the Amco Cup. And I think by memory, my favourite one was when Western Division beat Penrith in the Amco Cup final. And I've got a feeling that another classic was West Magpies defeating Roosters. And it came down to Russell Fairfax missing a goal right in front. He skew-iffed it. And I think West, in those days, not West Tigers, West Magpies, the black and whites, beat a very hot Roosters side who eventually destroyed with Fairfax and Schubert and the like, and Monkey Mays and Arthur Beetson destroyed St George's, as we need to know this, 38-0 when it was 3 points a try in the grand final. One as a kid when I was a St George supporter was very devastating to me. But anyway, on the weekend, the Friday night match, it was 38-32. That's amazing. 70 points scored in the match. I guess it was entertaining if you like sides to get out with a big lead, then surrender again. It looked like in that first part of the second half, they just switched off the Cowboys and Dragons started to come back and looked like they may snatch victory up there at Townsville. Very humid, I was told. Many players had to have extra water, and even at this time of the year. So let's have a look at the stats, which is really important. Crikey, the try scorers, we have to quickly go through these. Jeremiah Nanai, Scott Drinkwater. Now, this is because I was delayed putting the the broadcast out. I actually missed my bets on this. And if I remember correctly, we stood out Scott Drinkwater, and we also stood out Jeremiah Nanai were our two bankers. You can agree with me with this if you've been following our tips here. So pretty much straight away, those players scored within the first half. Right on halftime, Jeremiah Nanai scored. And then Tom Dearden was our first cab off the rank. And of course, we had as a backup Jackson Purdue. So we missed a lot of money here, folks. Even for the small outlay that we usually play, we say bet responsibly here on Every Point's a Winner. But Terrell Sloan went over for the Dragons. Matthew Feeney, that was an interesting try. Corey Allen with a big bruised eye. Sloan went over again a second time, and two to Jacob Little, who brought them back into the match from when he skirts away from dummy half there. The conversions were pretty poor from both sides. 4 from 7 for the Cowboys and 4 from 6 for the Dragons. So, yeah, in the end, it was just the 6 points, and they held on. But I really thought they could have won by more. Both sides, we'll find out in a second what the completion rates were like. But the top tacklers here were Griffin Neen, who came on and had a very big game for the Cowboys, 44 and 30 tackles for Jack DeBellin. He was just totally worked over before he got pulled off by Reece Robson, who had an outstanding game there at dummy half for the Cowboys. If you look at the ladder, we'll have a look at the ladder before we close tonight. They're on the fringe of 9th, 10th, 8th. That's what they're trying to shoot for to get into the top 8. They're going to have to win every game, I believe. And their last game, though, is a bye. So that helps. But obviously, they're going to have to wait for other teams' results and what have you. It's getting a bit close to the cigar. So I think they can't afford to lose another match to Cowboys. If they played as good as what they did in that first 20 minutes, then I would say, yeah, they've got a fairly good outsider's chance to make the 8. But let's have a look here at the team stats, which is really going to tell us how the game fared out. Possession rate was 55% to St. George, 45% to the Cowboys. Time in possession, 22 minutes to the Cowboys and 28 to St. George, but they couldn't break the line. Completion rate was really good for St. George, 91% and 78% for the Cowboys there. All runs meters, the Cowboys ran 1,863 compared to St. George, 1,772. Post-contact meters were pretty good for St. George, 678. You can see they were hungry. It was a game that they really, really had to win. 521, a lot less there for the Cowboys. Tackle breaks, St. George 34, the Cowboys 25. Average set distance 50 metres to the Cowboys there, and only 37 for St. George. That's something that their coach has to look at, Coach Flanagan. That's not good. Having a look here, kick return metres, much better from the Cowboys, 321 kick return metres, destroying St. George's kick return metres at 126. That is a big difference. Offloads, 14 offloads to St. George and only 6 to the Cowboys. But geez, isn't he one of my favourite players, Jackson Purdue? The speed, he's got a long stride on him, but when he hits the ground at top speed, good luck trying to get him. And Gutho just gave up the chase on him once he got through for his try, Purdue. And he's done it the week before when he accelerated through that gap. It might have been even 3 weeks ago. And it was just pure acceleration. Reminds me of the acceleration that Benji Marshall used to have off the mark. Lethal. Once he'd throw a little dummy or a little step on you, and then he'd have the acceleration to just shear through that first couple of 5 meters or so. And and he had options all over the place. Marshall, different player, but I'm just saying it reminds me of that acceleration off the mark. Total passes 275 St George. They were throwing it around, and 181 for the Cowboys. Dummy passes 36-24 St George. The kicking fairly even here. They made a little bit more kicking meters there, St George. Probably looks like about another 160. Forced dropouts, 3 to the Cowboys, 1 to St George. Kick defusal, 60% to the Cowboys and 44% disappointing. Well, you got Sloan back there as well. He's targeted by many guys that put the bomb up. Defense here, 87% effective tackle for the Cowboys, 90% to St George. So their stats weren't bad. Tackles made, though, 375 to the Cowboys, 280 to St George. So they had to work really hard for that victory, the Cowboys, no doubt about it. Missed tackles are even worse. This is similar to the previous game. Excuse me, I need to wet the whistle. Effective tackles here. This is ineffective tackles is really disappointing for the Cowboys going forward. 22 ineffective tackles. St George only 6. You would think St George had won this match on these stats so far. So far. Missed tackles 25 and 34 to the Cows. Errors here, only 4 for St George. 4 for St George, 14 from the Cowboys. Penalties conceded 10-5 to the Cowboys. Ruck infringe was 3-1. You would think they would have lost this match, but unbelievable. There was no excuses this time where you could have blamed things before, Flanagan. Their defence was exceptionally weak in parts where they started to just carve them up. And there was Dearden who single-handedly, for mine, carved them up with drink water. It was phenomenal. Anyway, St George have got a long way back, although they're narrowly in front of. We'll have a look at that ladder, as I said before we close out. But God, they've got to keep on winning as well. And another team that's got to keep on winning, you would think they would hang in there for the 8 is the Brisbane Broncos. The next game we're going to go over, it was Parramatta causing what I thought, as I told you guys, it could be the ball over of the weekend, and it sort of was to a degree, apart from Titans destroying the Warriors at home. That was, from on a slightly bigger upset. But especially with Moses back there, that was always leading me towards tipping Parramatta, but I couldn't tip them, especially up at some Suncorp Stadium, and they had pretty much a full strength side, the Brisbane Broncos. Let's have a look at the stats and see how it went. The top tacklers here, as we go down the page, 51, Jordan Ricky. Geez, he's been outstanding of late with his defence. Charlie Geimer, a real work animal for Parramatta, 46. Most run metres, Reece Walsh with 182, and Zach Lomax had a big game. Finally, it's all coming together for Zach. But, of course, 2 brilliant kicks to Zach from Moses, and one of them, I think, 2 of them resulted in a try, but I don't know whether it was both from the kick. There was just fast hands with one of them from Moses. Line breaks here, Reece Walsh 1 and 2 to Josh Adokar, who was celebrating a certain amount of tries in the game. He went over. But let's have a look at the try scorers anyway whilst we're here. And it was Adam Reynolds. That was a classic. When he had that intercept and his little legs were pumping like pistons, and you could see they were going to catch him, but his momentum slid him over the line. So it was a fair enough try from Adam Reynolds at the 23rd minute. Sean Russell, he's been having, as I said to you during the preview, when we're making our selections, he's one to watch out for because he's had an outstanding year so far. Zach Lomax, 2 tries. Josh Adokar, 1. Billy Walters. I can't catch Billy. Every time I have Billy, he doesn't do what he does. And every time, well, we don't have him, he'll go from dummy half there. But he scored a really good try there in the 58th minute, which sort of looked like it sealed the match for the Broncos. I really thought that the Parramatta were going to get run down in the end, but they held on, and they held on. And congratulations, Coach Riles. I think it was an outstanding effort from your boys. But Moses, the kicking game made it really hard for Broncos in this match. He just kept on pinning him in their own 20, in their own red zones, and it was hard work for the Broncos. But anyway, let's have a look at the stats to see if certain things point out to why the Broncos only lost in a 2-point. Well, it was actually a disallowed try, wasn't it? They were all jumping up, thinking they got out of jail in the last dying seconds, and it was disallowed with Reece Walsh being in front of the kicker. So completion rate here was 86% completion rate. That's fairly high for Parramatta, who's well down the bottom of the competition. 82% completion rate for the Broncos there. Time of possession, 51% to Para and 49 to the Broncos. All run metres there, 1,586 to the Broncos and only 1,381 to Parramatta. Post-contact metres were fairly even, but another 70 post-contact metres there for the Broncos. Line breaks 4 to Parramatta and 3 to the Broncos. I really like the way Moses and the boys, they had that really deep line set during their attack. And so it really gave them time, gave them freedom to attack so well. And their back line was really good. And don't forget, Penasini was back as well. So he's been fantastic in the centres there with Sean Russell. Kick return meters, 174, very similar, 171 to Parramatta. Let's have a look here. Offloads, 3-4, similar. Receipts, fairly similar. A few more receipts there from the passing from Parramatta. Total passes, another 40 more passes from Parramatta. So they're throwing it around and being quite creative. Dummy passes, surprisingly, 23 dummy passes to Broncos, over 4 from Parramatta. The kicks here, 25-21, both great kickers in the game, both of them, Moses and Reynolds and the like. Kicking metres here, an extra 200 from Parramatta, of course, Moses. And that was the secret, how they eventually suffocated Broncos out of the match, where fatigue got them in the end. And the disallowed try, of course, but he was in front of the kicker. Sorry to tell you, Bronco fans. Okay, let's have a look at the defence. 90% for Broncos and 87 for Parramatta. Pretty good. Tackles made, 327 to Para, and as I said, with a little bit of bad ball handling there, Broncos, and solid defence from Parramatta, 348 their tackles made, so they had to make another 20 tackles there, Broncos. Missed tackles, 30 to Broncos, 40 to Parramatta. It's something that Riles has got to look at. One intercept each. Ineffective tackles, 9 to Broncos and only 7 to Parramatta. The errors from negative play, it was 9 to Para and 8, so fairly similar to Broncos there. Both of the interchanges, all the interchanges were used in the game. So going forward, Broncos need to fight back. They've got a couple of hard matches over the next rounds, but we'll look at them at some stage. But we need to look at them in the ladder. They're getting a little bit of a sniff. They really needed to win it, because with the Warriors losing, that would have bridged that gap between 4th and 5th there. So, but anyway, it is what it is. And Parramatta, I think, will just keep on winning. They're going to be a freaking good side next year, I think, Parramatta. Let's get on to the next match anyway before we get laid down too much in that game. The Warriors went down, were hosting the Titans, and Desi was celebrating a certain amount of matches, I believe, and 24-16, so they won by 8 points. Just click on that there. And I think at half time it was 12-10. They got to the front there, the Titans. Looking at the try scorers was Adam Pompey. My God, I had him going for so many trebles and doubles in the past, and he never converts for me. As soon as I let him go, he scores the first try in the 3rd minute. That was heart-rendering. But we did stand out Lika Halasima, and we didn't have Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. He was the hot favourite at $1.56. Jojo Jafita just keeps on killing me with Philip Sami. Every week, especially last year, I would have Jojo Jafita, Philip Sami, and also Beau Fermor. He has not scored for a long while, but Beau Fermor. I don't know whether it was something to do with not getting just after the Origin, he just hasn't been playing that well. He had a fairly good game with attack, but he just hasn't been getting the ball what he usually gets. He was a prolific try scorer last year for the Titans. So, but anyway, Philip Sami went over twice, Jojo Jafita twice, and Jaden Campbell just delivered 2 beautiful balls to Sami. Fantastic. And Lika Halasima, he's a monster. I warned you about him a long time ago when we started this podcast. Tanner Boyd was fairly good with the boot, 2 from 3 and 3 from 4 from Jaden Campbell. Let's have a look at the stats anyway. We'll just look at the top tackler. And it was Jackson Ford, 54. That's who we stood out, Jackson Ford, for the Warriors, along with Lika Halasima. They were our 2 bankers. And Mawaki Futuaki was the top tackler there, 40 for the Titans. Let's have a look here at the team stats. And the possession rate was 54% to the Titans, 46 to the Warriors. It was a slippery ground, so the handling was quite significant for a wet game. But I did tell you guys to half your bets during any wet surface game because of the ball handling. But surprisingly, it wasn't too bad. 90% completion rate there for the Titans, and only 78 to the Warriors there. Something that their coach has got to look at. All run meters there, an extra 170 meters there to the Titans. Line breaks. This is worrying for the Warriors going forward. 5 line breaks to 4 in favour of the Titans there. Tackle breaks, 26 to the Titans and only 21 to the Warriors. Average set distance, 42-40 in favour of Gold Coast. Kick return meters, a little bit more there from the Warriors. Passing offloads, 12-6 in favour of Titans. Total passes, 241, very similar, and 231 to the Warriors there, 241 to the Titans. Kicks, 26-19. Geez, a lot more there from the Titans. Kicking meters, a lot more from the Titans, 713 to 582. They did get trapped a lot in their own red zone and in their own half, the Warriors, and they had to just gassed them in the end. 90% effective tackles, though, for the Warriors, and 91 for Desi's mob. Des Haslam's mob, the Titans, at 91%. Missed tackles, 21, only 21 from Titans, but 26. A lot of things here to be worrying the coach for the Warriors there. Intercepts 1-0, ineffective tackles 22 to the Warriors. And against a very attacking side like the Titans, this is why they lost. These stats are just quite obvious. And 14 ineffective tackles there that's nearly half for the Titans. Errors, 11 negative plays to 6 in favour of the Warriors. Yeah, wow. Geez, their home crowd was quite, apart from the couple of good tries and that first try from, or second try from Halasima after Pompey, they didn't have much to cheer about, really. They were just chasing their tails for most of the match and went in half time 2 points down. Penalties conceded 6-4 in front of the Titans there. Not much else you can say. There was a one head injury assessment by the looks of it, but we won't worry about that now. Now, that's what I did. I'm glad I mentioned that because we had Chris Randall as one of our main bankers, and he didn't get a run in the second half. And according to the radio that I was listening to, they said he's gone off with a head injury. So why it wasn't checked with they must have got it wrong because why it wasn't a HIA, because the tab will give you your money back with a HIA, providing it's either in the first half or in the first 10 minutes of the second half. It's got to be HIA and not allowed back onto the field. So that was really disappointing that we lost one of our main bankers, Chris Randall, there. So that was devastating to us. He may be out for a couple of weeks. We don't know the extent of his injuries. Let's get on to the next match there. So well done, Desi's mob. The Titans, they're trying to get off the bottom of the barrel. They'll be fighting it out with South and Newcastle Knights for the wooden spoon, I believe. Panthers with the next match, 36-2. This was clinical and a warning for all you fans of all your other sides. If you watched even half the match or the extended highlights of 14, 15 minutes like I did, I watched the first highlights plus the extended highlights, and I think they're starting to play like they did last year when they won that grand final, and they keep on strangling sides. They just keep on trapping you in your own 20 until the fatigue keeps coming. The fatigue comes, it builds, it builds, it builds, and then you're playing catch-up football. They didn't even go over for a try, the Tigers, which was devastating to us because we needed a couple of try scorers to complement who we stood out for Panthers. Lucky we got a nice double there we stood out Lindsay Smith. That was the value of that game. Lindsay Smith was $5.50, so we got a good collect from him. But we had him into Thomas Jenkins as the reserve selection. But so he got us in front for that game. But we did have a couple of try scorers, including Adam Dewey and the winger Gerald Skilton. It didn't look like scoring. They just tackled him out of the match, 36-2. The thing that killed me is we had Casey McLean the week before, and Casey went over and scored the second try here. Lindsay Smith was brilliant. That scored our first one, and he was our banker. Then we had Casey McLean. We didn't have him. Dylan Edwards, Liam Martin. Now, I'm really angry because he was only mentioned that he was going to be as a possible bench starter. Had I known he was as fit as a fiddle and they just brought him on fresh, well, then I would have chucked him into the anytime try scorers because he was good value after that 2-week break off after the state of origin when he had that injury. So I was really disappointed when he had number 19 on his back, which is one of my lucky numbers. And when he went over, I just went, no. Anyway, because we always have Liam Martin, and we even had him in the first 2 state of origins to go over. Isaac Tago went over in the 67th minute, and as I said, Thomas Jenkins, Milky, went over with 4 minutes to go. Nathan Cleary was phenomenal, and if you look at the start of this presentation, you'll see the picture of him going for 6 for 6, and he got 6 out of 6. Great kicking, and he had an outstanding match. As I said, every team needs to really pay attention to the Panthers. How far they can get up into the top 4, I don't know, but I think they can nearly win every match with what I saw on the weekend. I want to see them against a top side like Canberra, Melbourne, or Canterbury, because that was like a grand final the last time they met Canterbury, and they got away with a victory. So Watch out, guys. We may be seeing another grand final entry for the Penrith Panthers. Okay, let's have a look at the team stats here in a second once we see who the top tacklers were. Yet again, Isaiah Yeo with 47 and Terrell Mayne with 50. They're always on top, those guys. Most run meters, 322 for Dylan Edwards, 362 for Sunia Taruva. And most line breaks, 2 to Lindsay Smith. He nearly went over twice, and Api Coruscant looked like scoring, but was held back about a metre from the line. Okay, let's have a look at the team stats here. Oh, it's so cold in Sydney at the moment. That's starting to go a bit cold. That's like nearly like an iced coffee. Okay, so completion rates here, 88% to Panthers. That's class. And still pretty good for them Tigers, 83. They just couldn't break that impenetrable defence. All runs meters, 2,177 for the Panthers and only 1,500 for the Tigers. They were gassed, and even when they're trying to get out of their own red zone, they're all standing in a line like Indian file. No one really wanted to do the work to get him out because they were just so fatigued. Post-contact meters, just looking at the difference there, it was about 40 more post-contact meters to Penrith. Line breaks, major concern here. 7 line breaks to Penrith, 1 to the Tigers. Tackle breaks, 43 to Panthers and only 30 to the Tigers. Average set distance, 50 metres to 42, Panthers. Kick return meters, wow, 289 to 109 for the Tigers. That's massive for Penrith. Just looking at the offloads here, 10 offloads to 7, Panthers again. Everything's reading towards Panthers' victory and a thrashing, and in which it was. An extra 60 passes there for Panthers, throwing the ball around like a hot potato. Kick defusal, phenomenal kick defusal from Panthers, 89%, and only 69 for the Tigers. Unbelievable. Defence, 90%. There you go. And 87%, 90% to Panthers, 87% to the Tigers. Tackles made, 369 to the Panthers, and 392. Nearly 30 more tackles there made. They were totally gassed by the Tigers. Missed tackles, 43 Tigers and only 30 the Panthers, and 1 intercept to nil. Ineffective tackles, 15 to the Tigers, 12 to Panthers. Errors, unbelievable. 9 from Panthers, 10 from Tigers. That's all you really need to know about that match. But if that hasn't fired out a warning to all the sides in the 8, well, they're in the 8 now, but all the other sides that may be facing up against them in the finals, you better get your brave faces on, I tell you, because that was a total python, or let's call it pythonic. We can make up a new word, pythonic strangling from Panthers. Or here we go. That was a panthonic strangling. Anyway, enough with the comedy. Leave it for Leslie Nielsen. Now, as we get to the next match, I saw the extended replay this afternoon. Cronulla just did what they had to do. Jesus, a brave effort from South. 14-12, they went down. Tell you what, I had a dinner to go to with a lovely lady, and that was nice. One of my good old friends, and the food was delicious, mind you, and the company was fun. But I missed the game, so I would have been pulling my strands of my hair out because we had Tyrant Munro as a selection. I didn't play this game after Milky Jenkins went over for the Panthers. I just ran out of time, and I thought I'd just let it go, and that's what happened. Ronaldo Molitalo went over, Blake Briley. There's two we probably wouldn't have had, maybe Molitalo as a last-ditch throw-in, but Tavita Totola also, who went over with 2 minutes to go for South, sadly had his shoulder totally broken. They were just holding it up in the air and walking him off at the end there. Very, very sad. Tyrone Munro went over in the 39th. He was one of our bankers, but not our main banker. Nicholas Hines got 1 from 1. Not many points scored in it. It was 6-2 to South at halftime. And let's have a look at the players' stats in a second, once we see who the top tacklers were. Ryan Gray, 65 tackles for the South, and 38 tackles for top tackler for Cameron McGuinness there for Cronulla. Most run meters, William Kennedy, as you expected, being at fullback there, 247, and Jai Gray, 163 for South. Most line breaks, Alex Johnson. He looked like he was going to go all the way in one of the tries, but he just got caught 2 and 1 to William Kennedy. Let's go over to the team stats and see if there was anything that was significant here. Possession was 58% of the Sharks, while against a good side like the Sharks, 58 to 42 to South. And they're virtually missing half their side, more than half their side, South, with injuries. So you've got to say it was brave nonetheless. Completion rate here, though, was 81% to Cronulla and 80, nearly equal with Cronulla there, South Sydney. All runs meters, 1,800 to Cronulla and only 1,300 to South. Post-contact meters, a lot more from Cronulla there. That's very telling for the Supercoach. 630 for the Sharks and only 425 for South. Line breaks 4 to South and only 2 from Cronulla. Tackle breaks 36 for Cronulla and only 21 for South. Average set distance, 2 metres more to Cronulla there. Getting down to the passing, oh, wow, there's an extra 100 passes from Cronulla. Dummy passes fairly even, not that many dummy passes thrown, surprisingly. Looking at the kicking meters here, wow. South had 944 kicking meters to Cronulla's 632. Kick diffusal, 58 there to South and 50% to Cronulla, something that the coach needs to look at there for Cronulla. Defence, effective tackles 90% from South and 92% from Cronulla. Tackles made 412. Whew, it's a wonder they were still standing at the end there. 412 South and only 316 to Cronulla. So virtually, you could say 90. The accurate read there is probably 98 more tackles. You work out how many sets of 6 that is. That's unbelievable. Oh, missed tackles, 36% South, 21% to Cronulla. Intercepts 1 each. Ineffective tackles 12 to South and only 6 to Cronulla. There's some telling tales pumping out here at us. But there you go. That was the Cronulla and South game. Cronulla march onwards inside the top 8, and we will have a look at that later before we leave. Now, the last 2 matches, Dolphins had the bye, of course. The last 2 matches, it was a procession there down at Canberra at the GIO Stadium for the Canberra Raiders, 44 over Newcastle Knights 18. Now, let's look at the try scorers here. This was a game we did end up quite a bit in front. Ko Weeks was our main banker, and he went over in the ninth minute. Excuse me. I just went down the wrong way. I better have another sip of coffee. But anyway, Ko Weeks was our main banker, and that was a beautiful collect there he was surprisingly put up at even money, and we took the even money with glee. Sammy Sasagi, I chucked him in at the last minute because one of our other standouts did not get the run, and he was a team omission. So that's why we had Simi Sasagi. Now, our other banker from Newcastle did an intercept with about 30 seconds to go before halftime. Fletcher Hunt. So we got a nice three-legger there and two nice two-leggers with running out of KO Weeks. But the one we really wanted, we would have had three-leg parlays plus three two-leg parlays. If Ethan Strange scored in the second half. Strangely enough, I looked at the time that he was spent in the second half. On the radio call, he barely got involved in any of the play. It was all Owen Paddy, Smithies, a couple of the replacements came on, sort of moved him out of the way, which was a shame because we needed Ethan to go over. The one that killed me, though, and has been really good to us here at EPOR with anytime try scorers, was Tom Starling, because he was good value at 9-2. Tom Starling went over in the 46th minute, and I was just hitting my head going, why didn't you put him in instead of Ethan Strange? But would have, could have, should have. And yet again, Matthew Timoko has killed us for the last 2 weeks. But anyway, it was 7 tries to 3. It was a procession in the end. Dane Gagai tried hard there, but yet again, this side's got so many injuries, vital injuries. This was no surprise to me to have a massive 13-plus victory. So let's have a look at the top tacklers here. It was Zach Hosking, another good player, great forward there for the Raiders, 33. And a big shout out to Steve Lammy, who's a massive, massive Canberra Raiders fan. 39 to Leo Thompson. Well, where's he heading next? Is he heading to the Sharks? I can't remember. We'll worry about that later. Matthew Timoko raced most run metres, 170. Dane Gagai, 176. Most line breaks, 3 to Timoko, 2 resulted in tries, and 1 to Dominic Young, who hasn't quite found his feet, and he's missing all those feeding players that feed him the ball. Let's have a look at the team stats here. Time of possession, 29% to 29 minutes to the Raiders there, and only 24 to Newcastle. So 55% to 45 for Canberra there. Completion rate, 80% to Canberra, and sloppy again for Newcastle, 66%. The young kids are getting a run, that's all I can say to you, in Newcastle's defence, and this side's leading the comp. So what do you expect? All runs here, the all runs meters were another 190 there for 180 there for Canberra Raiders. Post-contact meters, massive from Canberra, 604 and only 420 for Newcastle. Line breaks 7 to 3. And there you go, Canberra have been doing that to all sides. Tackle breaks, 36 and to Canberra, and 35 also for the Knights. Kick return meters, 170, surprisingly a little bit more there for the Knights, and 158 to Canberra. Just looking at the offloads, 13 offloads, but under pressure from Newcastle to 8 of Canberra. Receipts, 426 to Canberra and 399 to the Knights. I call them the hapless Knights this year. The kicks here, another 5 more kicks from Canberra, as you'd expect. Fogarty, a great kicker of the ball, and really he's a great component of the torpedo bomb. Let's have a look here. Kicking meters, 711 to 398. Yeah, that's nearly sad for me to go over these figures for Newcastle. Kick defusal. Well, you've got Dane Gagai, who's not generally a fullback. He's had to play the last 2 or 3 weeks there at fullback. 18% kick defusal and 93% kick defusal to Canberra. Well, that's why they're leading the comp. Effective tackles, 84%. Canberra, 89 effective tackles to Newcastle. Luckily, otherwise the score would have been in the 60s. Tackles made, they must have been so gassed. 380 to the Knights to 287. Virtually, yet again, 93 to 100 more tackles for the Knights to do. Work out how many sets of 6 that is. If that doesn't gas you, I don't know what will. Ineffective tackles, surprisingly here, 12 to Knights, 19 to Canberra. They are an attacking side. I'm sure that Coach Stewart will tweak that before the final series. That's all you really need to know. Negative plays, 14 negative plays and errors to Newcastle. They're 14 to 9 of Canberra. Everyone used the right amount of interchanges. And the very, very last match we're going over before we look at the table was an outstanding victory to the Bulldogs, thus the blue and white colours in the background. The late wife, Lizzie, beautiful Lizzie, she'd be smiling up there now that the Bulldogs are heading back towards the top position there with Canberra. So very, very good result for them. It was a game, I did. I put my hand up. I tipped Manly because they had pretty much a full strength side with Ola Kawatu being there, back there. Was it Ola Kawatu? Anyway, yeah, and he done his shoulder again. Unfreaking believable. It was 42 to 4. It was 7 tries to 1. Now, this killed us because we actually had a couple of try scorers for Manly. Had I led out and tipped Bulldogs, well, then we would have had a lot of these players. We would have had Bronson Xerri, who's been one of our outstanding anytime try scorers. Not this year, but last year he collected nearly every game for us. And Samuel Hughes, I may not have entertained him, nor Inari Tawala, but definitely Xerri would have got the bickies there for us. Steve Crichton was phenomenal with the boot, 7 from 7, a real Cleary effort of kicking there. And Ruben Garrick, it looks there, 0 from 1, not good. Garrick had one of his quiet matches. Manly were virtually just blown off the park, I'm afraid. Let's have a look at the important stats here. Jacob Preston had an outstanding match in defence, 49%. Jake Trbojevic, that's all he does is tackle, 42%. Most run meters, Connor Tracy. If you single him out and look at his, if you'd have to be on the team to get his the work that he does, it's amazing. 307 metres as opposed to Lehigh Hopewadi, the opposition fullback, 174. He was phenomenal, Connor Tracy, and he's really the unsung hero of Canterbury for mine. Most line breaks, 2 for Connor Tracy, and only 1 to Jason Saab. They really did a good job of marking up one of our main bankers too, Tolotau Kola, who's been scoring every week for us. So we didn't do too well on the tips there. Especially getting thrashed 13 plus there. But it did surprise me, and there was a lot of pundits saying that Manly have got the side, and they beat them last time they met in the final series last year in the playoffs, and they knocked Canterbury out of the comp. And it was, I think, 2 or 4 points in it at the end. But however, let's have a quick look before we go and look at the ladder at the vital stats and see why Manly lost this match and how they lost it through their stats as well that were adding up to what you saw. It was just a clinic from Canterbury. One of their best victories over Manly ever, I believe. Team lists here, we're not looking for that. Why has that come up? Team stats is what I'm after. Possession here, 44%. Not very good there for Manly. 56% for Canterbury. Time of possession, 33 minutes to 25. Canterbury. completion rate, 87% for Canterbury. I thought Lockie Galvin had a much better game because a couple of times where he had a break, he realised if he threw it, it would have ended up being a knock on because players had defence all over them. A lot of Manly players were ready to cut out those passes. So at least he's just using his nous, whereas the week before he was just throwing willy-nilly passes. So a bit of maturity there this time for Lockie Galvin. 87%, and he's only a kid, 87% to 75. That's phenomenal there, and not good for Manly. All runs metres here, 2,147 metres to only 1,200. Canterbury, 2,146. Melbourne, 1,286. That's not good. Post-contact metres, Canterbury, 550 and 433 to Manly. Line breaks 11 to 3. I can't see Manly. They might be a bit of a thorn in the side for a few sides battling out for the 8th, but I can't see them progressing in the final series, even if they get into 8th position, because there's a few there that can just snatch victory and get in there like last year. It came down to the last couple of matches. But I can't see them on this performance going any further than the first week. So that's my personal opinion, because this was a game that they had to stand up against Canterbury, and they were just flattened in every aspect. Tackle breaks 39 to Canterbury, only 29 to to Manly, sorry. Average set distance here, 43 metres and 31 for Canterbury and 31 for Manly. Kick return metres, 350. Oh, my God, 350 to 138 of Manly. There's worrying signs for Coach Seibold. He's got to be asking himself and doing a lot of video replays at the moment, what went wrong? Well, these stats are really not good for them. Total passes, 320 Canterbury. They were throwing it around like the Canterbury from the 70s with all the Hughes brothers and Mortimer, 320 to 224. Dummy passes, 10 to 8 for Manly, but Canterbury were onto them. They didn't fall for them. Kicks, fairly even. Kicking metres, an extra 200 metres there from DCE, Darcherry Evans. Very good with the boot. Forced dropouts, 1-0 to Canterbury. Nothing else you really need to know there. Kick defusal, though, 80%, surprisingly good for Manly, and 78% fairly even there for Canterbury. Tackles made, 359 to 354 of Canterbury, so only a few more tackles made there from Manly. But the line breaks destroyed Manly because Canterbury was scoring off them. 90% effective tackles to 84 in favour of Canterbury there. And this is the one that caused their biggest grief. Ineffective tackles, 31 Manly, only 12 to Canterbury. Errors, 12 negative plays from Manly and only 7, nearly half, from Canterbury. Penalties conceded, 5-4 to Canterbury. Ruck infringements, 3-1. Manly when they were gassed, they were all over them. And that's about all she wrote. Let's have a look at the ladder now before we wrap it up here. And thanks for joining us today. And hopefully you enjoy and get something out of your team, whether they won or lost, going forward into round 22, is it? Round 22 starts on Thursday. So going forward, let's see where your side is on the ladder. And it's Raiders up the top there, and they have 36 points. So they're 2-point buffer over Canterbury now, who are in clear second position. That was a big win for Canterbury in more ways than one. So in third position, Storm, 2 points behind Canterbury, with 32. In fourth position, 2 points behind Storm, Warriors. Now, there's a 3-point gap to Panthers in fifth position on 27. That's the side you've got to watch for mine. I would love to see, to be honest with you, love to see a Canterbury Raiders grand final because they're both attacking sides. And I think it'd just be a fantastic thing. And I'm sorry to all you Penrith fans, all you fanatic fans that love the purest style of game of defence. I want to see attack for a change. Storm now without Hughes has a question mark over their whole season. They can do it, and they won without Hughes in that second half. Luckily, Harry Grant stood up to the mark, but there are questions now hovering over Storm. I still think they can get in there, but it would be so nice. But someone's got to knock out the Panthers because they are in fifth, 3 points behind the Warriors, who are in fourth. Then we have only 1 point back in sixth position to the Broncos. So that's why they need to keep winning too. Now, on seventh is Sharks, also on 26, but a worse for and against the Broncos. In eighth position, Dolphins. Now, that's a side, if they could get quite a few of their players back, including Cody Nikorima, that's a side that could cause some massive boilovers in the top 8 playoffs. But they've got to get there first. And without Cody Nikorima, I don't think you can just rely on the kid Katoa to do it all by himself, and Amarillo and Herbie Farnworth. So Dolphins own clear 8th position there, but they have a better for and against the Seagulls with that bad loss there, also on 24, but they're in 9th. Then 2 points behind the Seagulls in 10th are the Roosters. They're battling also for that 8th position, of course, 7th and 8th position. They're not out of it, but we have to see what their draw is as well. So 3 points. Now, here's the big break and I think one that Cowboys need to, although Dearden is one of the greatest players since the state of origin, but what a game he had on the weekend. I don't think he's going to single-handedly win or get in the top 8. They're going to have a lot of things happen for them because they're 3 points behind the Roosters in 11th position. Their losses are just going to sort of back up in the last 4 or 5 weeks against them, and they're going to be hoping for other sides to lose. That's not how you want to be getting into the top 8. Yes, they got the players. They got many state of origin players: Jeremiah Nanai, Reece Robson, Dearden, and an outstanding player that I've tipped to you since he was a 16-year-old, Jackson Purdue. But there's many good sides in front of them. So that's that 3-point buffer between the Roosters in 10th to the Cowboys is going to be a thorn in the side for the Cowboys, I believe. Dragons also, they are 1 point in 12th, 1 point behind the Cowboys with 18 points. Also on 18, West Tigers, and but they are 13th. In 14th, also on 18 points, is the Eels. Now 2 points back into 15th position, who are now fighting for wooden spoon contention. The Knights, with all their injuries, horrendous. 16. Then equal to them, but with a worse for and against, is the Titans, 16. And in the last position, Rabbitohs with 16 in 17th position. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. You honestly can work it out for yourself. That 3-point gap between the Roosters in 10th, I think all the sides above them, they will be fighting it out for the 6th, 7th, at least the 7th and 8th position from the Roosters upwards. But St. George, Cowboys, they can't afford to lose one match going forward. That's my opinion, and hopefully you treasure my opinion because we've tipped you so many good value. Our best value here were Lindsay Collins at $7.50 on the Thursday, Lindsay Smith, the two forwards, and that beautiful Canberra game where we got Ethan Strange up, who went missing in the second half, we would have had a blitzkrieg weekend. But thanks for joining us. I came away losing a few dollars because of that Manly game. I didn't get one try scorer. I had 4 or 5 try scorers, and they didn't look likely. But anyway, that's what happens. So bet responsibly. We only play like $2 doubles here, $1, $2 doubles, $2.50 maximum parlays. And that's what we insist that you do going forward. It gives you a little bit more excitement in the game for NRL. So join us on Thursday and make sure you be nice to your mother, be nice to your friends, be a good person yourself, and enjoy all your rugby league going forward. Axel Phillips, goodbye for now.